This video is brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. Use code PLAYTOWIN5 at the affiliate link down below for 5% off to help support the show.
Welcome to the Play to Win podcast, where we talk about winning in cEDH. I'm Cam.
And I'm Dylan. This week we are talking about 2024, the year in review, Play to Win edition, cEDH edition, Magic the Gathering edition. What happened this year? Our predictions for this year. Were we right? Were we wrong? What happened? Maybe a little bit about what's going to happen next year.
And the best cards that were printed this year, not just for your 99, but also the best commanders that were printed this year too. Basically doing an entire recap of what happened in cEDH this year, or trying our best to.
Let's see if we can get it in an hour. You ready?
Try our best. So,
right into it.
First thing that I want to talk about is at the beginning of the year, the first podcast that we put out was a predictions podcast where we predicted what cEDH would be like for the year 2024. And we also went over every single set that was released this year. So I figured we would start off by not just recapping the sets that were released this year, but also pointing out a couple of notable things that we mentioned during our predictions episode that stood out to me as I went back and rewatched it.
I can't believe you rewatched all of that. Okay.
I watched it at 1.5 times speed. So.
Wonderful. I'm so ready.
All right. So the first set that came out this year was Murders at Karlov Manor.
Yes.
Murders at Karlov Manor.
This was the Return to Ravnica set.
Yeah. And we spent a lot of time calling it Murders at Markov Manor instead.
Which is wrong, yeah.
I just only pulled out like the notable things to me. And notably here, we assumed there would be a lot of 2-mana, 2-color engines that would come out of the set. But really, the only thing that we got out of the set were the Surveil lands, I guess.
Ledger Shredder didn't come out of this?
No, that was out of Nuka Penna.
Yeah, okay. Bummer.
Yeah, big bummer. So that was Murders of Karlov Manor that came out this year. The Fallout set came out this year. Remember when we did the Fallout Commander decks?
I got a couple of good Boros equipment stuff from the Fallout sets, I think. But that's for my casual decks. Nothing for cEDH.
Nothing for cEDH,
that I can remember, right?
We talked about the Wise Mothman mostly and spent a lot of time trying to figure out how Rad worked.
Yeah, I think Wise Mothman is actually a reasonable commander. I've seen that card, like commander, come up a few times, and it's normally like, it's pretty good.
Not only that, but the Master Transcendent. I know, like, way closer to when these commander decks came out, Ian was working on Food Chain Master Transcendent decks, and it's still something that sticks around too. So Bug Food Chain really got a lot of love with this set.
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
And then Outlaws at Thunder Junction came out. A couple of notable things that we mentioned with Outlaws of Thunder Junction.
Okay.
We called mounts. We called mounts to a T.
Oh, yes, I remember. I remember this vividly. Okay,
we definitely knew that they were going to put crew on creatures in some way.
Yeah.
But we didn't want them to be artifacts at the same time.
Okay, were any of them artifacts?
I think Mount only went on creatures, yeah.
None of them were any good, though, if I remember correctly, right?
No, we didn't end up seeing any of them in cEDH, but they were fun in draft.
Yeah, okay.
And then we also said, here's a quote, in a couple years, we'll see outer space laser guns and be more sci-fi-y. And we're getting that next year, which is pretty cool.
We're going to outer space next year?
Well, their version of outer space. When we're going into the Blind Eternities, that's their version of outer space.
Is that what we're doing? I don't know that I realized that.
Yeah. So the Blind Eternities is...
I know what the Blind Eternities... I thought the Blind Eternities was like the nothingness in between... planes?
Yeah, that's space.
That's
it's
true.
It's like the Garganta in Bleach.
I guess I just didn't know that we were going there in 2025.
That is one of the sets we'll be going to in 2025, is we will be exploring the Blind Eternities.
That's fun. Cool.
That's fucking sick.
That's Eldrazi, right?
That's where they're from, I think, is they're from the Blind Eternities.
Oh. There's got to be stuff that's powerful from that set that's coming. I'm excited for that.
I'm sure
we're getting
a little off.
Yeah,
we're getting a little off top. But yeah, so that's coming way sooner than we thought that it would be.
Okay, nice. So we called that. We're right about stuff.
We're definitely right about stuff. That's all. I tried to only point out stuff we were right about.
Yeah, it's best to remember stuff this way.
I don't think it would be as fun to basically recap that episode and go, we were wrong here, because how the fuck were we supposed to know?
Go watch it yourself, and you can figure out where we were wrong about.
Yeah, and you can laugh about the shit that we said then. Yeah. I mean, we'll still laugh about some of the stuff that we say later here, too. Don't worry. Don't worry. But next, then, Modern Horizons 3 came out, and we were right that this ended up being the strongest cEDH set out of the year.
Do you remember in our, like, did you watch our, like, Modern Horizons set review? Like, did you watch that much? Like, did we talk, like,
no,
talks about, like,
I didn't go back into the set review. I mean, we knew that Nadu was busted in the set review, for sure. We did assume that there'd be a lot of powerful creatures that would come out of the set just in general, which
We're fucking right.
it ended up being more of a modern and a commander set, which I think is something else that we called to in that episode.
Yeah, it ended up being really like a legacy and vintage set also. It affected I think all the formats that it touched like in a really, really big way. Bigger than it was probably supposed to.
I think so too. I don't think anyone expected Psychic Frog to impact every single constructed format.
That's one that I wish was like better in cEDH. I feel like it's close-ish sometimes, but there's just, I don't know, there's other effects that draw more cards.
Yeah, it fits all of the traps of only being good in 1v1.
Yeah.
Like incentivizing you to discard cards is only something you really want to do in 1v1. That's not really a resource you can utilize in cEDH so much. It technically puts you down 3 cards every time you discard 1. If you're looking at it from the same way that drawing 3 cards is 1 card, you have to look at it that way too.
That's true. Yeah, you're right about that.
Right?
Yeah.
So not only that, I forget where we were going with this, but I felt really good about making that smart comment.
That was really smart. Let's just stop it at the smart thing.
And let's talk about Assassin's Creed being the next set that came out.
Perfect. Yeah. I don't know. There are no good Assassin's Creed cards either.
I guess Ezio is really the only good one.
Yes. Yeah. Ezio's good, but really still only because it's a 5-color commander that costs 2 mana, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's really the only reason why it's good. It's just like a different kind of Jensen that you could utilize. And then Bloomburrow came out, which
Bloomburrow had a lot of hits.
You also mentioned that we would be pushing different kindred types, which I guess was kind of
we did.
That was a softball though. I'm not gonna lie, bit of a softball though.
That's true.
However, though, you were totally right because although I don't think we were expecting it to be otters and birds in particular that got pushed.
Yeah.
Valley Floodcaller has made those 2 creature types in particular just really eye-catching for me.
Yes, definitely. I'm playing Ledger Shredder in my Tymna Thrasios deck kind of because I'm playing the otter, because sometimes it can untap my Ledger Shredder, and if I have my Paradox Haze effect on my Ledger Shredder, I can tap it to bounce stuff. Very, small situation, but there's like 7 of those situations that Ledger Shredder kind of checks off, and after you get to the 7th one, you're like, okay, maybe this card is a little bit better. But yeah, I agree. The creatures that we got out of that set were surprisingly good. I don't even know that I realized at the time that Valley Floodcaller and Mockingbird were going to be as powerful as they were.
I didn't think so either, especially Mockingbird kind of caught me by surprise because I've been a huge Phantasmal Image stan for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of weird to me that, like, why would I ever want the ability to have a 6-mana Tivit at my disposal? But the reality is that's never what you're going for.
The biggest thing that I kind of missed is that it's a 1-drop that Ranger Captain of Eos can find, and making your Ranger Captain of Eos also quietly be able to sometimes just be a clone, like what, you know what I mean? Technically, your Ranger Captain can find Mockingbird, which can clone anything on the board. So now your Ranger Captain is also a clone effect. That's like a huge difference that I really didn't think about how powerful that was. The flying is also nice. The flexibility is okay, but being able to find it off Ranger Captain is so huge.
And we might end up be talking about that card a little bit more later on in this podcast too, as we move on to different cards
of the year.
Yeah, but yeah, Bloomburrow honestly was way more impressive than I expected it to be, especially in hindsight as I'm looking back over the year. Then we got to Duskmourn, and we didn't really get a lot from Duskmourn. We just kind of spent the portion of that podcast talking about what if we get like a Freddy and what if we get like a Jason? And
we did get Chucky.
We did get a Chucky, but I had a much harder time pointing to cards from this set and making a 1-to-1 comparison as opposed to Innistrad. And maybe that's just because I'm less familiar with these types of horror movies than I am with like Brothers Grimm tales, because like also Walt Disney made Brothers Grimm tales popular by making them kid friendly too, right? So maybe that was just me, but I think that's something that kind of made this set have a little bit of a harder time resonating with me over the long term in the way that original Innistrad's gonna do.
Yeah, I think so for me a little bit too. To me, it really seems, and this is also, I think, because of what we do and being older, but when I was first getting into Magic, going to the local game store for the pre-release was such a huge part of getting into each individual set, and coming every week back for Standard was such a huge part of being involved in the sets. And now being involved in cEDH, where we really just get 1 card from each set and cEDH just kind of grows out its own beast, it makes it a little bit different, getting involved into each individual set. So I'm with you that I don't have the same attachments to sets like with Innistrad when I did, did, but I don't know that that's the fault of the set, or it's just like the style of just like the way Magic is now.
I think you're absolutely right. I think COVID had a lot to do with it too. Like how I experienced going to stores is still different than how it was pre-COVID. I think that there's just been a big culture shift with a lot of stuff. But yeah, maybe that's just every set is going to be like that for me now, and I shouldn't be looking at like pre-COVID sets the same way that I'm looking at how I'm interacting with Magic now.
I think a little bit it's just kind of different, and also comparing anything to Innistrad is always a tall order because Innistrad was the coolest, best time of Magic
ever. Yeah.
Like anyone who played knows that it was one of the best things ever. Like it's such a hard thing to compare to, but I still thought this set was fun and good. If you ask me real quick, name a card from the set, it would take me a while to think of one. Do you know what I mean? But with Innistrad, I could name one pretty quickly.
But you would get there with Duskmourn, though.
I would probably name Valgavoth.
You would name that makes sense. For me, it's always going to be Marvin. Like Marvin, because Marvin's like the cEDH card that's going to see the most play out of the one
that's actually good. Yeah.
So it was still fun. All of the art was incredibly evocative. You know what? We might be talking about more cards from the set a little bit later on the podcast too, actually. So I think I'm downplaying Duskmourn a little bit here, but we've talked a little bit too much about Duskmourn. We got to move on because we did not predict that we'd be getting another set after all the other sets that they had announced.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't know about Foundations this time last year, so we didn't get to really talk about Foundations at all.
That's probably also why we didn't have a gameplay of Foundations, too. We didn't know it was coming.
It just wasn't really on our radar,
Realistically, I don't remember there being enough cEDH commanders.
Name 4 cEDH commanders from Foundations. You can't.
There ended up being like, I think 2-ish from the other part of Foundations. What is it called?
Jumpstart?
The Jumpstart versions of Foundations. But I don't know why we didn't want to stretch it to make it work. Normally with other sets, we'll like stretch some commanders to make it work. But this time, there just didn't seem like there was anything that was fun and worth stretching. Although I do wish we would have played the Starfish.
Hindsight being 2020, the Starfish is definitely something that I wish we would have on the channel more.
Plagon.
Yeah, luckily.
I should probably build this so we can get it on the channel,
I think so. Yeah, luckily, we're going to continue making content in 2025. So
we'll definitely have Plagon on.
So we'll definitely do more Plagon. It would have been like Plagon and Niv Mizzet totally outperforming the rest of the decks at the table.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we don't want that all the time.
Yeah, but now that we've kind of reviewed every set that came out in 2024, I want to talk about a couple of the other predictions that we made from that episode that we'll see if came true or not.
Okay, yeah, give it to me. What were our predictions from last year?
Well, notably, we didn't predict the bannings of Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, or Dockside Extortionist, which shame on us.
Shame on us. How can we not see that coming?
How do we not see that coming? Yeah.
This year, we should pin out 5 cards we think they're going to ban and see if we're right next time.
I feel like we'll have more success picking 5 cards that they're going to unban.
I think they might unban some stuff, and it's going to come out like almost right after this podcast.
We're filming this podcast on Friday the 13th.
I think on December 16th, there's a new BNR update list, and normally they said the commander is not going to get updated with the BNR every time, but this is the first time with the commander like being owned by Wizards, so there might be some unbannings.
So if something changes in lieu of the holiday episode next week, we're just gonna
have to do some, I don't know, we'll figure that out when we get to it. Yeah,
we'll talk about it instead. But yeah, so we didn't call that, so that is certainly gonna affect the outcome of a lot of other
predictions. Yeah, because we probably thought Dockside would be very much more involved with, and it was involved with a lot of this year.
It certainly was. Yeah, Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, like we got them through all of the summer, like so we still had a long time with them. A notable play to win meta thing that I want to point out is that I did not follow through on podcast segments.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about wanting to do podcast segments in that episode. And
next year, you know?
The first segment was actually the entirety of the podcast last time. So
it was immediately in the very podcast that
we broken.
Already know.
I don't know. Yeah, so I'm not going to make any promises for 2025, I've decided.
It is what it is.
Content's going to come how it comes.
Yeah.
We did call Seedborn Muse making a comeback.
Yes, that's true. Seedborn did get quite good this year.
We were right about that.
We were not right about the reason, though, because I think Dockside leaving was part of the reason why Timna Thrasios in particular has gotten a little bit better and why Seedborn's better, right?
And why Seedborn Muse has kind of made a comeback in a lot of different decks, yeah.
Also, the Valley Floodcaller making his Seedborn Muse even better, I think is huge. Giving all of your stuff flash is really good when you can untap your lands each turn also. So that's like a big also thought.
Yeah,
that's a big thought. Good
yeah.
sentence, Dylan. Very nice.
I'm still going to count that as a win, though.
That's a win. We got that right, too.
Another point for us, then. We also called Narset, Shieldred, Notion Thief, and Bowmaster getting stronger because we wanted to hate on card draw more.
Yeah, did they go? Did they?
I think, if anything, we found them to be weaker by the time that the end of the year came. Shieldred the Apocalypse sees no cEDH play anymore.
Bowmaster's good. That's for sure.
Bowmaster's good, yeah.
Bowmaster's good. But ultimately, Narset is the closest one, but Narset being so easily attacked is just not good in multiplayer.
Same thing with Notion Thief. Like, Notion Thief is a great way to punish draw, but it also...
Bad against Bowmaster.
It's
so
super
easily.
fragile. So both being super easily to interact with makes them not good pieces that you want to combat card draw. Just win the game instead.
So we were wrong about that. Yeah, I think the answer to a Ristic Study is your own Ristic Study. That's the best answer, realistically.
Hysterically, we asked for a better Stern Scolding, and we ended up getting Strict Serenade later in the year.
That's something. What are we going to get this year? Well, are we going to talk about... That's predictions is another episode.
Now, yeah, that we'll talk about what's
we're
going to
get another one. Eventually, it's going to get better and better until it's blue counter creature spell.
Well, yeah, we'll have to start asking for cooler things, is what I've decided. If they're going to listen to us and give us stuff that we want, we're going to have to ask for like a 3-minute time walk.
Split second, you win the game.
Ooh, yeah, split second, you win the game if your name begins with a C.
Damn it, that card sucks. I hate it.
No, it's so good. It's so good. We also talked about wondering if Winota and Jetmir, decks like that, might make a comeback, just because, like, Beatdown we thought was getting a little bit better. It was better to have a Haymaker in your command zone. We were talking about, like, decks like Atraxa and Tivit way back in January. So
overall, I would say that's not the case. Though some of those, like Atraxa and Tivit, can be playable. I've still seen Atraxa put up decent results even post-ban, but I don't know that that's because Atraxa is the good beater. Atraxa is just a reasonable outlet.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I don't think that we called like Winota getting better for the right reasons. I've heard that it's a little bit better now.
I haven't seen anything
Neither
about that,
have
though.
I, and only seeing is believing.
So only seeing is believing. Santa Claus taught me that.
I said that to someone in a customer service call.
Did you?
Today. I called someone customer service, and they were like,
wait, for what service?
For my car insurance. They said, I can change it to this rate. And I said, well, I'm not going to pay for it yet because only seeing is believing, and I don't see it in my account yet. So
that's great.
I'll pay it online once it comes up.
Oh, God, what a nightmare situation. I'm sorry I had to go through that.
So it's fine. So it's because of the bans in the direction that the format has gone in since the bans that may make decks like Winota and Jetmir a little bit more popular now.
Still haven't seen it.
And
so that's a no.
We weren't right for the right reasons. Yeah. Again, we said green cards will see less play, which we were right about for most of the year.
For most of the year, I think that was kind of right? Like, Kinnan was the only green deck that was seeing something for a little bit. Am I wrong?
No, that was pretty much it.
A little bit.
Yeah, but like, again, Atraxa liked Food Chain, and that was pretty much it. Like, you were mostly an Esper good stuff deck with a small handful of green cards that were also worth playing.
I've certainly seen a bit of an uptick in green stuff in like tournaments and local things since the banning of Dockside.
Definitely. Well, again, I think that Thrasios Tymna is the best deck in the format right now. So we're certainly going to see a lot more calling rituals and cards like that coming up. I know you called the fall of Atraxa.
I said it wasn't going to be good.
But we also thought that the format would speed up after mid-range hell, which we've thought that was going to happen multiple times throughout the year. And it's yet to.
I don't know. I think there are brief moments where it does speed up for a moment, and then I think it ends up slowing down very, very quickly every time that this happens.
I think I would rather classify that as just like a blip where you can get away with playing fast decks, but like it's easy for 3 slow decks to catch on and go, all 3 of us are trying to go to the late game.
Yeah.
So it's easy to kind of crush those decks in the meta once they start to come back up after so much slowness has already been exemplified.
I don't know. Honestly, I change my opinion on this quite a lot. I go back and forth because it feels so pod dependent on whether or not it's true that it's correct to just like be the first one to do as much action as possible. That's correct. Or when it's correct to not do anything and just stay alive as long as possible. And it feels like certain times you can get rewarded for one and certain times you can get rewarded for the other. So I don't know that it's really one way or the other. I just think that cEDH is kind of broad, and depending on the pod, being able to go both ways is really helpful.
Honestly, we could talk about theory until we're blue in the face,
right?
But it's all about what's currently happening in your game, and you have to make decisions on the fly over things you may have never talked about before.
Realistically, I think like the strength in Tymna Thrasios lies in that it can just win on turn 2 if it feels that like everyone mulligan and there's no blue decks and you're on the play and you have Fastest Oracle and Demonic Consultation. That is like an option, but you're also very advantaged in the late game if you grind. Even like Kinnan can do things like that, even though even Kinnan can present turn 2 wins, but grinds very strongly in the late game. To me, that's like the best conclusion, is that like the slow decks isn't exactly where you want to be. The decks that can go both ways are where you want to be. Mid-range L are the best decks.
You got to do both. You got to be able to do both. You got to be able to take advantage of every single situation that you put yourself in. You can't be in a spot where like, oh shoot, I could have one here,
right?
But because I'm not playing, like my deck doesn't have the capability to, you're fucked.
The end of that thought.
And moving on to the next one. The last prediction that I want to talk about that we made was that we were hoping for more in-person Commander-specific events.
I feel like we got that.
I want to say we got that. We did go to Command Fest Atlanta this year, and I would love for Command Fest to come back too. As of the time of the recording, we haven't seen a Command Fest schedule.
No.
I don't think we saw a Command Fest schedule until pretty late into 2024, though, because I think they're summer-exclusive events.
That might be true.
So it might be a little bit before we see something for them, but I'm hopeful.
We will be in MagicCon Chicago, though, playing a lot of Commander.
That's true. We're definitely going to be at the MagicCons at least.
Yeah,
so
that'll be good.
Yeah, that definitely will be good. But those are the just some notable predictions I thought would be fun to talk about.
That was fun. I'm glad we talked about those.
All right, now we got to get into some meat and potatoes of the episode here.
Just going to say the meat and the potatoes.
Really?
Yeah, I was just going to use that very...
Are you also hungry?
No, actually. I just ate before this. We're talking about the best cards of 2024.
We are going to talk about not just the best commanders, but also the best non-legendary creatures that were printed this year, too.
Which one do you want to do first?
Let's talk about the non-legendary creatures.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
Do you want to start with some honorable mentions here?
Yeah, I think we should.
This is a list that you contrived that I agree with entirely.
Are we making a top 5 or a top 10?
No, we're doing a top 5.
Top 5.
Because these are all, I don't want to rank these. These are all honorable mentions.
Well, you don't want to rank the honorable mention.
No, we're not ranking honorable mentions.
How many non-honorable mention cards do you have?
5.
5 only.
5.
No leeway. Those are locked in.
There's no way that any of these cards are beating the 5 that I have here.
Okay, but we will rank those 5.
Because you also looked at you put all these underneath the top 5, and you clearly went, oh, none of these are better.
Yeah, I did.
Because otherwise you would have texted me or
I would have
something.
moved them up. Okay, you're
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
We will rank the 5, though.
We will rank the 5. But we just want to mention honorably.
Honorably, these way more than 5 cards. Go ahead.
Talon Gates of Madara.
Yeah. Should we read all of them?
No.
Okay.
No, they're honorable mentions.
I think Talon is a great card. I just don't know what decks it goes in, and I haven't really found a great home for it yet.
I like it if you are playing a full crop rotation package. Like if you're not just playing Cradle, but you also want Emergence Zone.
Yep.
I'm finding many times then where I'm like, oh, if I could just like phase out the commander that I need in order to like help myself win the game, I really like it there.
I also am not sure about it though in 4-color decks. I don't know where it slots. I think it's still worse than Emergence Zone and Ancient Tomb, and how many like colorless lands, although it can produce a color, like how many of those lands do you really want? I don't know.
I agree. I think for me, I haven't tried this out in a 4-color deck, but I've really liked it in 3-color decks though. Like it was good in Rogthras for me.
Yeah.
Really liked it there. So I think if you are like really trying to get Gaia's Cradle into play, but you want something for all the other land tutors that you draw when you already have Gaia's Cradle, I think Talon Gates is a really good tech piece.
Yeah, I think you're right. I also like this one particularly because even if it comes in tapped, it still can phase the thing out. So if you like activate off of a Thrasios and put it in off of Thrasios, you can phase something out.
Or it doesn't even matter if like Archon of Emiria is in play too. You can still get the ability.
Exactly.
Which is also an activated ability that's uncounterable, and it stays in your hand until the ability resolves and just puts it into play.
Well, the activated ability is counterable, but not by like a counter spell. What would you even need to counter it? Because
Stifle. It would be like a Stifle effect. Yeah, Stifle or the other one, Trick Bind, that counters an activated ability. Anything that...
But is it an activated ability? Because it's from hand. Normally, an activated ability is a creature in play has an activated ability. Like Curse Totem only affects things in play.
Because Curse Totem can only affect things in play. Whereas you can still activate the stuff that's in your hand, but that's still an activated trigger that goes on the stack to which you can respond to.
Okay.
So even though the card hasn't moved, the card's still in your hand, you can still counter it, but I think that means you can still just pay another 4 mana and just try to do it again.
Okay, either way, it has an enters trigger and an activation. So you could counter the enters trigger or you could also counter
counter the enters trigger.
Counter the enters trigger. But I'm saying if you don't have something that can do that, like you can still counter the activation, I guess.
You still could, yeah. But that's a bad idea. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Just explains why you shouldn't do that. Yeah. 6. We're also going to talk about 6.
6. I like this card a lot in Glarb specifically.
Yeah, there's just like a couple of graveyard decks that are a little bit slower that 6 works out very well in. And I think 6 has kind of helped push towards the resurgence of green post-ban.
In the decks that I have played it in, it's been really great. I don't know how much it belongs in like the strongest of cEDH decks. It's just a little slow, but it's been really good value when I've played it.
If your win conditions don't involve a non-permanent, I think it's great. Like if you have any of the Devoted Druid lines in your deck, I think it's great for that. I think it's great if you're playing Underworld Breach in your deck. I maybe don't think it's great if you're playing only instants and sorceries as the way that you win the game.
Yeah, you want to be able to make sure there are some hits. Getting the land back is, I think, the best part, and then filling up your graveyard for Yawgmoth Swill or an Underworld Breach, I think that's the second good part. But also being able to cast things, that is relevant, but weirdly, it's not even like the best thing about I think it's the other stuff that's better. Those other things just happen more often. There's just too often like Drannith Magistrate or something that shuts off the casting from the graveyard. There's something that stops that so often.
That's interesting to me because to me, what makes
it
that
bad.
Yeah, like what makes that card good is that like you can get back stuff that's been countered.
It just doesn't happen that often.
It's just a slow engine for like a card type that is really only 1/3 of your deck, so you're not always going to see it every time you mill 3.
It's an honorable mention. It's only going to see play. It's only going to see play in tier 2 decks. If it works well with your commander, it works well with Glarb because resetting the top of the library can be huge, and you want to be slow.
But I'm not going to lie, this conversation has made me like 6 less now.
Realizing that there's like a bunch of shit that shuts it off.
Before we started talking about this.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of shit that shuts it off, kind of.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. Yeah, High Fate Trickster is also next. We've been loving things that give everything that you have flash, and this is just a little bit more of an expensive way to do that.
I've seen a few Timna Thrasios lists recently that have been doing well in some tournaments playing this card. So for me, it's only recently come out, so I still feel like we have to look at it a little bit more. 4 mana is kind of a lot, but the flexibility of just giving everything flash is huge. Not limiting to just non-creatures like Valley Floodcaller, but giving it to everything is really huge.
It's busted in the Seedborn decks. Like when you play Seedborn Muse and on the next player's turn on their upkeep, you flash this in. How do you lose that game?
Yeah, just so much value. If you can just stay alive, you're in great shape.
Exactly. Vexing Bauble is another one here that just catches a lot of players off guard.
This is another one that has like dominated 60 card formats because of like the 1v1-ness of it. And in cEDH, I haven't seen it make quite as much of an impact, but it's still, I think it's been a huge include in the decks that do want to play it. Just not that many decks want to play it.
It's good with Urza Saga. It's really nice that Urza Saga can get this, but I really only like it in your artifact-based stacks deck. I think it's still... Like Lavinia saw some play for a little while, but Lavinia does 2 things.
I think it works better if you think of it as like a defense grid. I think that's its best effect, but there's too many other types of counterspells in cEDH for just preventing against Force of Will to be as relevant. Like in Legacy, when they have 9 counterspells and 8 of them are 4 Force of Will in 4 days, then Vexing Bauble is really good. But in cEDH, you have 11 counterspells and 4 of them are free.
4 to 5 of them,
are free, and there's still 6 or 7 that are not free. So the ratio doesn't hit quite the same in that aspect. The card's still powerful, just not all the time in every deck.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it too. The Surveil lands we mentioned a little bit already. These have been huge for low color decks, and I've been seeing it in some 4 color decks even too.
I play 1 copy in Rogsai and 1 copy in Timna Thrasios.
I should think about it for Timna Thrasios. I'm not on 1.
To be honest with you, I still don't love it in the 4 color decks, but sometimes it's really great. Like when it's great, it's huge.
When they hit, they hit. But when you're looking at them in your opening hand,
you're like, oh, this fucking card is the worst thing ever. I have to mulligan now because it's a stupid piece of shit. Like
they're the easiest thing to bottom on a 6 or a 5. But you look at 2 7s before that.
Oh, when you have Mox Diamond, you're like, thank God, get this fucking piece of shit tap land out of my hand. But when you get to fetch for it at the end of someone's turn, get rid of a land on top of your deck and rip a spell, it's like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever.
There's got to be times though where you're looking at hands and it's your only land, and you're like, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
They're still really good. I do love them in general. And the last one here, I think Shifting Woodlands just narrowly misses out on the top 5.
It is a powerful card, but you need to kind of be in that low color green decks, and it has to specifically, like with 6, really target permanence and stuff. That's what it does. You have to be permanent heavy, but the card is really good.
Not just permanent heavy, because you also need to be able to get Delirium too. So like
graveyard heavy.
Yeah, like permanent and graveyard heavy. Like, again, you need to be winning with at least one permanent so that way it can be worth it, but it makes whatever you're trying to do uninteractable, or at least uncounterable.
Yeah, I like it in like an intuition pile if you want more green things to get back whatever you're looking for. I think it's really good in decks like that are like very turbo Underworld Breach, turbo graveyard stuff. But yeah, just like as a value card, it's not quite as good, which is why it's an honorable mention. But still, getting a land like this is huge because it's just so many cool, fun new options on a land. I really love these cards that incentivize you to play low color. I think we need more of that. We probably talked about that last year. I'll talk about it more this year, but like cards that give real power to 2-color things, I think are really good for Commander.
I definitely agree. So let's try to rank the top 5 cards printed in 2024 here then.
Not Commanders.
Not Commanders. No, not Commanders. We'll go over them next. So the first one that we'll talk about is Valley Floodcaller. We're going to show these cards a little bit more respect.
After we've been talking about these for half of an hour, let's read what this card does.
So this card is 3 and a blue for a 2/2 creature otter wizard with flash, and you may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, birds, frogs, otters, and rats you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, and you untap them.
This one was huge this year. It's hard to rank them without knowing the other. This one is, so I give it truly, it's like almost 5 out of 5, maybe a 4.5 or something. It's so powerful. I think it's one of the cards, if not the card of the year.
I am right up there with you too. Like this was the first one that I thought of when I was putting it on the list because so much has revolved around this card. Not only does Retraction Helix and Banishing Knack allow you to target your Valley Floodcaller with it, so that you can bounce your Soul Ring and then recast your Soul Ring, untapping your Valley Floodcaller, making infinite colorless mana this way. Like that's just this great way to be able to help you win the game in your Thrasios decks or really anything else that's using your infinite mana outlets. But it also like helps you just set up for like other combos too.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. It's such a good way to not only like allow you to kind of win the Rhystic Study battles of when everyone's drawing 1,000 cards, the only way to win the game is if you win on top of something else or like wait for as long as possible, and this allows you to do that, but also it being part of like a win condition in the Thrasios Tymna decks, kind of another reason why Thrasios and Tymna is so powerful, because they have access to like not only this additional instant speed value, but sort of like a weird way to make infinite mana kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. And having like weird synergy with other powerful cards in your deck, like Birds of Paradise, just like also gives it this extra little edge where it's nice that this effect just stays around in play and you always have the ability to cast your sorceries at instant speed.
Yeah, and like with Birds of Paradise is a great example because then it makes every non-creature spell that you cast basically makes you a mana with Birds of Paradise, which can be great to help you pay for Rhystic Studies or win these late game battles. It's quietly very powerful. Same thing with things like Ledger Shredder. It can all of a sudden your Ledger Shredder is an untapped 5/6 blocker that can kind of block out of nowhere. We're probably going to talk about another card, Enduring Vitality, the enchantment.
Yeah, we are. That's actually the next card that we're going to talk about.
That one in particular is also great with this card for the same reason of like giving creatures the ability to make mana. Should we just talk about that now too? Or?
Yeah, let's move into this one here, Enduring Vitality. This is 1 and 2 green for an enchantment creature, Elk Glimmer, with Vigilance, and it says creatures you control have tap and add 1 mana of any color, and when Enduring Vitality dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's an enchantment. It's not a creature, and it's a 3/3. Before you say anything that you want to say, Dylan, I know that our patron Demetrius Clark has a couple things that he wants to say about it, so I'm going to let Demetrius take it from here.
What's up, Play to Win? My name is Demetrius Clark, and I'm here today to talk about my favorite card of 2024. And for me, it's going to be Bambi, the deer, Enduring Vitality. This card is such a powerhouse. 3/3, so Orcish Bowmaster can kick rocks. It turns all of your value pieces into Birds of Paradise. So, you know, we've been hiding from the Orcish Bowmasters for so long. We don't want it to be able to ping out. Where you've got these kind of larger butt creatures, this turning them into Birds of Paradise has just been so helpful for all of my green decks. I run it in every green deck that I put together, and I think you should too. You're going to thank me later. You're welcome. Enjoy the rest of the video. Thank you for having me, guys.
Nice. Thank you, Demetrius. That was great. Dylan, why do you like this card?
I specifically just want to mention Kinnan, that I think this card is an all-star in Kinnan specifically. It may be good in other decks. I specifically know it is an all-star in Kinnan. Being able to be found off of Kinnan, making all of the creatures that you have tapping for mana now tap for double mana is also huge with Kinnan. I think it just makes so many things with Valley Floodcaller insane. The card is just particularly powerful in Kinnan. The other day, Tyler was tapping his creatures for like 10 mana. He had like 2 mana triplers out. He had this out. It was
the Nyxbloom Ancient.
The Nyxbloom Ancients. Yeah. It's another one of those cards that allows you to snowball out of control so quickly in the right creature-based deck.
This is a Tayam card too, right? Does Tayam play this card?
I don't know.
Because they wanted Cryptolith Right, at least in some kind of capacity, and now this is a Cryptolith Right that can get a counter on it when it enters when you have Tayam?
I lost to a combo that involved this card at some point recently with Tayam, so you're 100% right, yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more uses outside of Kinnan.
That's true.
And I think that we're only going to see more as time goes on.
The addition of it being a creature rather than just an enchantment from a Cryptolith Right is for some reason a huge difference. Normally that addition of 3 from 2 mana would be a big difference, but the fact that this also comes back if you destroy it basically means that it has hexproof, because no one is going to spend 2 removal spells on this. It's ridiculous, right? To get rid of your mana, they're going to leave it around, so no one's going to get rid of it. It's going to stick around forever. I'm still going to give it a 4.2.
It's worse than Valley Floodcaller.
But still a very powerful cEDH card.
But still a very powerful cEDH card, yeah. You know, Dylan, for our next card, I'm just going to let our patron Reactive introduce this one.
Hey everyone, Jeremy, also known as Reactive, here to talk about what I believe to be the best card in 2024 for cEDH. I'll give you a couple clues, maybe you can guess it before I say it, but it's a red spell. In the right moments can generate a lot of treasures depending on the deck, and it just completely can change a board state out of nowhere. Without further ado, of course, everyone knows. I'm talking about Dockside. Yeah. No. Did I write this before September? Hold on. Oh, no. Flare of Duplication. As your favorite neighborhood Magda enthusiast, let me tell you, this card slaps. Just picture this. You have like a 1/1 CMC red little dwarf on your board. Doesn't really do much. Flavor text, boring, nothing going on. But hey, at instant speed, that puppy can be your opponent's ad nauseam. Next to it, you got another equally unimpressive 1/1 dwarf, but out of nowhere at instant speed also can be a counterspell. This card has absolutely flipped the script so many times whenever I played it in Magda. The ceiling is very high on this card. The value that comes with it is somewhat questionable. It depends on the situation, but man, it leads to like super fun moments whenever you're playing, especially in Magda. Now, I'm sure you're saying like, well, Jeremy, of course, Grixis is out there. It should be playing it, but I don't want to talk about Roxai. Everyone talks about Roxai. I'm talking about the Magda. The Magda stands, the people who love Magda and playing dwarves, this card is for you. A free spell is always great. I give it a solid 4.6567 frogs out of 5 reindeer, or whatever we're scaling this on for this video. You let me know.
I recently played Reactive's Magda list on the channel, so I know all about how much this guy loves Flare of Duplication in this deck.
Honestly, that was a pretty spot-on rating. I think I kind of want to give it almost the exact same rating.
The same amount of frogs? The exact same amount of frogs?
4.6567, yeah, that many frogs is kind of what I would give this card. If you don't want to talk about Roxai, though, Jeremy, I would like to talk about Roxai, because this card is nutso in Rack deck specifically, but Roxai being able to copy things like Dark Ritual and Culling Ritual and Cabal Ritual and all of the rituals is obviously great, but being able to copy your own tutors like Demonic Tutor is wonderful at helping you set up your Underworld Breach combo right away, Beseech the Mirror, all that stuff. It also being a counterspell when you need it to be a counterspell is huge. It's literally everything that you want from Roxai, and for free, for no mana whatsoever, just sacrificing your commander. So yeah, I love this card. 4.6 is probably exactly where I would give it to.
It's definitely way better in those proactive decks than instead of the reactive decks, but I agree. I think I've been super impressed with Flare of Duplication in every application that I've seen of it this year, so really excited about it.
It's the both ways thing. If you can make this card go both ways, if you can make it help you win the game and also stop your opponents from winning the game, then that's a great card, and in those decks, this card's awesome.
Free cards that can be anything is busted.
What a thought.
What the fuck? Yeah. All right, our next card is Mockingbird.
Yes.
This is X for a blue No, this is X and a blue for a 1/1 flying bird bard, and you can have Mockingbird enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value less than or equal to the amount of mana spent to cast Mockingbird, except it's a bird in addition to its other types, and it has flying.
This one has the Valley Flood Caller stuff. It's a bird, right? That's
Oh,
nice.
yep.
Flying is good for Tymna and Yuriko. It's a 1-mana find off of Ranger Captain. We've said all of these things throughout this entire year, but all of them together makes this card just so fucking good.
The only other thing that I want to reiterate that I haven't yet this episode is that the thing that really gets me with this card is that it's a 1-mana Esper Sentinel clone.
Yeah.
And that I'm so used to spending multiple mana to clone Esper Sentinel, but I don't feel bad cloning a Birds of Paradise when I need to either.
It's also just a Birds of Paradise. It's for 1 mana, a Birds of Paradise. It's a clone that can copy a Birds, and sometimes that's great. Like sometimes you just need more mana. That's fantastic.
And giving whatever you clone flying is cracked in half.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's just it does enough. I think it's especially now with Dockside being gone and Phantasmal Image like not being like the cheapest clone all of the time. This one can be cheaper than that, and I don't say more flexible because you have to spend more mana, but the upside is better.
The upside's way better.
The upside's better.
I feel better spending 3 mana on a Tymna clone when my Tymna flies.
Yes, yeah.
Like, that's way better.
Yeah, that makes a big difference, yeah.
Really like Mockingbird. I don't know what I would give it. What would you give it? I haven't ranked any of these cards. These have all been you.
In blue-white decks, I think it's a 5 out of 5, if that makes sense. If you can play it with Ranger Captain Evios, I think that truly makes the card much, much better than it is on its own, because having your silence effect also be able to get you a clone is just so nuts. But on its own, I still think it needs the right deck, so I think it's kind of like some of the other ones, but I want to say it's like a 4.5. I like Flare of Duplication more, me personally. I just like the effect.
I actually put 4.5 down here too as you were talking, so I'm glad that you said that. I think it is a 4.5, so that makes a lot of sense. And then our last card here is Into the Floodmaw.
Oh,
This is a blue mana for an instant that lets you gift a tapped fish, which means that you can promise an opponent a gift as you cast the spell. And if you do, they create a tapped 1/1 blue fish creature token before its other effects. And you can return target creature to its owner's hand, but if the gift was promised, instead, you can return target non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand.
So this is a 1-mana unsummon, but when you need it to be, it can return any permanent, not just creature, to someone's hand. That's like the cheapest rate that we have access to.
Which has been really nice. I think this card is kind of taking the place of Dress Down and March of Swirling Mist.
Yeah.
Since we're not as concerned right now of blowing out tremendously large boards of creatures when like Winota was around and a big problem or something.
Yeah, I still think things like Chain of Vapor and Snap are often going to be considered around the same time or maybe before Into the Floodmaw is, just because the upside of those cards is pretty huge. Guy's Cradle makes Snap kind of nuts, and Snap can also be part of a combo. Chain of Vapor can make all of your Mana Rocks be redone Mana Rocks within an Underworld Breach and an Ad Nauseam deck. That's insane. Into the Floodmaw is just great removal. That's all it does. That's great, but that's all it does. It just returns anything to their owner's hand for cheap. If you want that, that's good. But a lot of the times, like, there's just so many options in cEDH. I want the removal that can also be part of my win condition. Do you know what I mean?
If I can help it, yeah. Because this can't target any of your own things. So it does not play the role of a protector whatsoever.
Right, which we thought would be less of an issue because without Dockside, who wants to bounce your own thing? But if you want to play with Necropotence or especially Necrodominance, oftentimes you have to get rid of the Necrodominance to go through some of the win lines, and having your Into the Floodmaw not be able to bounce your own Necrodominance does kind of suck.
That being said, Necrodominance is seen play in Rogsai only.
Yeah,
so
just because I play that card.
So I don't want to weigh that downside too heavily against it, which I think is why I still want to put it in the top 5. And like, I think it just barely edges out Shifting Woodlands because it's so much more flexible than Shifting Woodlands, and you don't have to turn anything on for it to work out. You don't have to give the person whomst thing you're bouncing
the fish. Yeah.
You can give the fish to whatever player is more advantageous for you. The Magda player who's not having Gaia's Cradle in their deck, and the fish is blue, so they can't sack it to
Flare of Duplication.
Also because it's a token. But either way, this still has a lot of nice text that's involved in it that I
Definitely.
think just pushes it up just slightly above the other cards from this year.
It's certainly in contention for like your 2 to 3 bounce spells that you should probably play in just about every deck, whether that be Chain of Vapor, Snap, like we mentioned, also Cyclonic Rift is in that conversation. You said Dress Down and March of Swirling Mists. Sometimes those also fill this kind of role as well. It's in that kind of slot of like
Your 4 to
catch-all-
5
Yeah,
catch-all bounce spells, like
exactly.
you're saying, yeah.
I still think I probably give this one like a 4 though.
I would say a 4.2 because I think I would give Shifting Woodlands a 4.
Oh, interesting.
That's why I have to make Into the Flood Maw just a little bit better.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that means that our number 5 best card printed in 2024 was Into the Flood Maw. The number 4 was Enduring Vitality. The number 3 was Mockingbird. The number 2 was Flare of Duplication. And then the best card printed this year was Valley Floodcaller.
I think this is right.
This is totally right.
There might be something obvious we're missing, but I think this is right.
I think this is right too, because all in all, we didn't get anything to the level of Bowmaster or the One
Yeah.
Ring this year.
That didn't come out this year?
The Lord of the Rings came out last year. We did not talk about Lord of the Rings in our anything. Yeah, I think clearly Valley Floodcaller takes the blue ribbon for this one.
I think that sounds right. That's been the one that has impacted the most games that I've played in and watched, and all of it's just impacted the most games of cEDH, I think.
Now, to round out the podcast, we're going to talk about the top 6 commanders
Yes.
from 2024.
Are we declaring an honorable mention, or are we knocking one out at the end and that one's the honorable mention?
Actually, we will have 2 honorable mentions because only 4 of these decks can
that's
be
fair.
played in our best decks of 2024 episode.
Which this is coming out before that episode?
this will come out before
I think the 22nd might be the
holiday episode.
holiday episode of the 29th is going to be the end of the year one.
That makes sense because I swapped the podcast around a little bit.
Which ones do you want to talk about first? The ones that are not making into that gameplay?
We should talk about the ones that have not made it into the gameplay because they are going to be the honorable mentions. So then we can start off with Rakdos the Muscle.
And there's honestly a good argument that this one probably should have been in the top 4, but yeah, read Rakdos for those who don't know the 17,000 things that it does.
Yeah, normally I don't want to read the honorable mentions, but
guess, yeah.
I want to remind myself what this Rakdos does because every time I read it, its ability changes. So what is it today? Today, Rakdos the Muscle is a 2 black and a red legendary creature demon mercenary with flying and trample, and whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile cards equal to its mana value from the top of target player's library. Until your next end step, you may play those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. And then you can sacrifice another creature so that Rakdos the Muscle gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it and activate only once each turn. And he's a 6/5.
And it's 6/5.
Yeah.
You mentioned Flying Trample?
And I mentioned the flying trample. Yeah, he's a
Mentioned the
big
Flying
beefy
Trample.
beater.
And there's a +1/+1 counters involved, or no?
No,
It doesn't
Stop
get bigger.
putting more text on this card. It's already confusing enough.
Sorry.
So yeah, so there's a lot of keywords. Every time you sacrifice another creature, you exile equal to its mana value from any player's library, and you can play those cards until your next end step.
Yeah, it's basically an evoke theme deck is what it is what Rakdos is. It's evoke theme. Every evoke card that you can get and play them in Rakdos.
Yeah,
It's not exactly true, but it works particularly well with a couple
With
of them.
any of them, Fury, Grief, Ingot Chewer, and Shriek Maw.
Even
They're
Shriek
so
Maw.
good. Yeah.
really, really good. Because you get that extra mana value. I've seen this deck whoop my ass a ton. It just goes so over the top so quickly. You do have the slight problem of a 5-mana commander that you have to get out and then do other stuff with. But if you can do that, if you can protect your commander, if you can get Rakdos out when you're ready to win the game, it's such a huge engine because not only does it allow you to see cards, but it also can potentially interrupt your opponents a little bit. It can steal counter spells from your opponents, which is kind of interesting. There's just so much that it can do.
I think it's a very high ceiling commander where the more time you put in with it, the more shit you're going to see that it can do. I think it's one of the more obvious decks as to how much better it gets the more familiarity that you have.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely true.
At least that's the vibe that I get from how much I lose to it. So then our other honorable mention then is Master of Keys. And I guess if we read our other honorable mention for commanders, I'll read the Master of Keys. X, blue, white, and black for a legendary enchantment creature horror. Thank God Dockside isn't around. It is flying, and when the Master of Keys enters, you put X +1/+1 counters on it and mill twice X cards. And each enchantment card in your graveyard has escape, where the escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost +3 cards exiled from your graveyard. And it starts off as a 3/3.
Underworld Breach for your enchantments, right? This is one that I've heard a lot about, but another one that I haven't seen a ton of, if that makes sense.
No, and honestly, I don't think that its tournament EDH lifetime has been entirely spectacular either.
It has some really cool potential, and it does some super unique things. And I know the pilots of this deck really love this deck. I have just not been super impressed. That being said, I have been killed by a giant key guy before. A 9/9 flying creature just did attack me. So like that can and does happen, but
I've been killed by Rakdos, Lord of Riots in cEDH.
yeah.
Like, so you could die to anything in reality.
It's fine. It can be a fine pick. I think there are better Esper options, and it's not making our top 4.
I think it's cute.
Yeah.
I think it's cute, and that's weird coming from a big horror that looks like this thing, but I think it's just cute. All right, so let's talk about what the top 4 commanders are, and we're gonna start with this one, Dylan, because I know it's near and dear to you. This is Glarb.
Yes.
This is black, green, and blue for a 2/4 legendary frog wizard noble with death touch, and you can look at the top card of your library at any time and play lands and cast spells with mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library, and you can tap to surveil too. But the lands don't have to have mana value 4 or greater.
Right. No, yeah, the lands can be regular old lands. I've liked Glarb a lot. It does kind of a couple things that are really neat that I've talked about before, but I can talk about quick again, is the fact that, one, you're not drawing any cards, so nothing like Orcish Bowmaster or Notion Thief or any of the draw effects are actually going to affect anything that you do. Getting the extra land and like just seeing what's on top of your library, giving you that constant extra vision and knowing what's coming allows you to make much better decisions as you're playing through your deck. The 4 CMC thing on top, I don't think it's great to really feed into that a ton, but there are certain free interaction spells, stuff like Force of Will and Subtlety. Like, I think Subtlety is actually great in this deck.
Mindbreak Trap,
Mindbreak Trap is a good one. There's things like that where Glarb makes those cards in particular very good. I think overloading it with a ton of 4 drops is not really the way to go, but the free ones that save 4 mana, but you can cast for free, I think are in particularly really good with Glarb.
Makes like Noxious Revival really cool too.
Exactly.
Like, that's another free counter for something that you've already used.
So I think the deck has a lot of potential. My only issue with it is like lack of colors. The more I was playing the deck, the more I eventually made Tymna Thrasios because I wanted to just do what Glarb could do, but I was finding myself getting into situations where I couldn't protect my win enough or like find the win quick enough. And Tymna Thrasios just has so many extra combos and so many easy ways to like set up win conditions than Glarb. Like, Glarb does have Doomsday, but it doesn't have Silence to protect the Doomsday. It doesn't have Grand Abolisher or Ranger Captain Vios to protect the Doomsday, and I think those effects are really good right now.
I think it's easier to blow out Glarb's win conditions too, which is a little bit harder to do against like these typical Tymna Thrasios decks.
I found myself kind of saying like the reason to play Glarb to me feels like to play Doomsday, but like Doomsday is not that great, and I guess the reason to play Tymna Thrasios is to play like Devoted Druid, and Devoted Druid's not that great either, but just the difference in white was what made me swap. That being said, I still think Glarb is probably the best Sultai option we have right now and is a really good grindy tournament deck, if that makes sense.
I agree, and that's kind of why it's placed above the other honorable mentions here.
It's had some pretty good tournament results so far from what I've seen.
I agree. And then we have Stella Lee, wild card, next.
I can't believe this card came out this year. It feels so long ago.
Honestly, I can't believe it either. Yeah, but this won a blue and a red legendary creature human rogue. Says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile the top card of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you can play that card. And you can tap Stella Lee to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control, and you can choose new targets for that copy and only activate this if you've cast 3 or more spells this turn.
This one feels to me very kind of similar to Rakdos in that it like kind of gets you card advantage. It's part of a win condition, which we didn't mention the win conditions of Rakdos because just you can go look them up on your own if you want
They're
to.
so complicated, but they're so cool.
Stella's got some too. They're kind of in the same vein. The difference is Stella's 3 mana where Rakdos is 5. Stella's in blue where Rakdos is in black. Stella has those advantages, and Stella's like way to win at instant speed is also like a very huge deal.
A lot of the things that let you draw your entire deck in Stella are at instant speed. So you can just like hold up 2 quick things, like maybe a piece of interaction and then a cantrip, so that way you're ready to go and like can win on top of someone when you need to.
Yeah, and a lot of times with Stella, the real big issue with it is like the thing that is making the loop happen is like a Stella trigger. So like countering the third spell or whatever doesn't always do it. That it doesn't. They're just responding to the third spell and making a copy of it.
Yeah, right. So you can try to counter the Twitch, but the second that I activate Stella, it doesn't matter that you have a counter
They're
spell in the
making a
stack.
copy of it. They're responding to the counter spell. So like countering that third thing doesn't even work. So it's kind of tricky to interact with. And a lot of players don't know when the right fucking time to interact with Stella is. So I think it gets a lot of help in tournaments for that reason, which is why it's so high on our list.
And it's pretty quick, too.
Yeah.
Like, you really only need to keep a hand that has a card that lets you draw your deck, like an untap or cantrip. You're going to draw the other spells that you're going to cast before that. So as long as you can get Stella out and you have one of those cards, like it's surprisingly easy to set up hands that look appealing for the deck.
Stella's good.
Stella's just really good. We also got Plagon, and we got Plagon incredibly recently, but I think Plagon has already done enough to show that this is going to be one of the best commanders of the year.
I think so.
This is 2 and a blue for a legendary Starfish Wizard, and when it enters, you draw cards for each creature you control with toughness greater than its power. And then for a blue and a white hybrid mana, you can have target creature you control assign combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power this turn.
Really, that first ability is what we're after, the drawing cards thing. This card, I feel like, is one of those cards that rewards you for playing good cards, if that makes sense. Like, it rewards you for playing Dranith Magistrate, and it rewards you for playing Displacer Kitten to Fairy combo. Like, it's just so good with so many of the other good things that are draws to blue and white. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it also, like, kind of forces you to play a little bit more protective, which you already want to do in this color combination. Like, you get to play Spellskite and have that be a great way to, like, stop the interaction that's coming at you eventually. So, I don't know. I think Plagon is just way overperformed. It's made cards like Cloud Shift and Essence Flux like way better in cEDH.
What's the one with Rebound?
Ephemerate?
Ephemerate, so good.
Which then also makes like your Spellseeker even better when you get to play these cards in addition. So I think, yeah, Plagon's way up there. Drawing cards in the command zone's phenomenal.
Yeah, drawing cards is phenomenal. Works with the win conditions. It's pretty cheap. It's easy to cast. The damage part, I don't think that's really relevant or really going to come up a ton. Maybe sometimes.
Maybe sometimes. Like if the games are slow enough that you might be taking out players with enough instances of 1/3s and 1/4s that can get through. Because you're in blue-white. Like your win conditions aren't amazing, but you're just able to draw a ton of great cards, though.
Yeah, and being able to draw them in huge bursts is very different from how a lot of other cEDH decks draw cards right now. A lot of other cEDH decks will accumulate value with Rhystic Study things or the like over the course of turns, but this deck has the ability to draw quick bursts of 7 cards, 10 cards. You know what I mean? If you can flood the board quickly, especially some of the 0-mana artifacts that have big toughness, Ornithopter and stuff like that, and especially if you can get in like the new 5-mana Hellish Norn that doubles ETBs.
Oh, yeah.
This deck has the ability to get out of hand quickly, which I really like. The only thing that I feel like it kind of lacks is, like we were talking about earlier, is that ability to win quickly. I don't know that this deck really has a ton of that as an option.
Yeah, it's not good in every single quadrant like that. There's going to be games that you feel like you're behind and just can't keep up.
I got to assume that there are like when the player goes for the turn 1 win. I mean, you're playing a bunch of counter spells. Maybe you can stop it, but you don't yourself have a way to capitalize on going first at a pod with no blue. Like, you can't really do much.
No, you kind of have to lean into the stacks creatures that you're playing that have big butts.
Yeah, I think so.
Which I think just pushes this deck into that space instead.
What are we ranking these for?
There's one more that we have to talk about.
One more still.
Yeah,
okay.
one more.
What's the last one?
Because there was one that got banned this year.
Oh, yeah. A 5 out of 5.
Yeah, Nadu Wing Wisdom is 1, a blue and a green for a 3/4 flying bird wizard, and it says creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability only triggers twice each turn. I like how it says only triggers twice each turn. Like, you can say it just triggers twice each turn. I won't feel bad for it.
Yeah, we don't need to spend much more time talking about Nadu. The only thing I do want to say is when watching Plagon go off, sometimes it does kind of feel like Nadu when you're playing a Phantasmal Image as a clone of your commander and then drawing another 5 cards, 10 cards, and then your commander goes to the command zone and you replay your commander and you draw another 5 or 10 cards.
Yeah, there's not a lot of decks that do that.
There are some similarities there, but yeah, Nadu's gone. We're not going to talk much more about it. It's a 5 out of 5. Good riddance, best commander of the year, without a doubt.
It's for sure the best commander of the year. So what do we want to give the number 2 spot to then?
I want to say Glarb, just because I've seen Glarb do some good stuff in tournaments and it's been around a little bit longer. It's hard to say with Plagon because it just hasn't been around very long.
If we're going to do that, I think Stella Lee's the number 2 deck because
it has more results. You're right.
It has been around longer than Glarb and Plagon.
My gut says if I want to say the most powerful, just like inherently without kind of looking at what I've seen from tournaments, I think Plagon's the strongest. I I think Stella Lee is next, and I think Glarb is after that. I took Glarb apart already because I do think it kind of lacks, whereas Stella also doesn't have silence effects, but I think what Stella offers is huge. The only issue with Stella is you are playing a lot of bad cards. So if they get rid of Stella and you can't spend 5 mana on the Stella again, your deck is full of bad cards now. Whereas like Glarb is playing like mostly like, yes, subtlety kind of stinks, but I had a situation the other day where I had a subtlety flash in hardcast mode, I would have blocked a creature that was coming at me and it felt great. So those happen.
After playing Stella Lee, it feels more like a combo deck than anything else.
Big time.
You're not really playing much interaction. Like you have a couple of the good counter spells, but you're also pretty low on them because you need to run some of the bad cards to make Stella Lee work. I don't know. I think that Stella Lee is just a little bit more powerful than Glarb.
I think so too. Yeah.
Just because I think she's also a little bit more innocuous. Like Glarb, even though there's going to be people that don't know everything that you're doing, they don't know how good Bolus the Citadel and Doomsday are in Glarb, they're still going to know you're the Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation color player. Like I should be looking towards you a little bit. So I think that you're going to be able to get away with Stella Lee wins a little bit. And then even after people learn how to play against Stella Lee, you're still going to be able to go, I can win at instant speed above whatever you guys are doing and still get wins on top of that.
I think that's the important part. And another reason why Plague-On I think is so good is that ability to win over top, instant speed, works well with Valley Flood Caller, things like that. Where Glarb still does actually work pretty well with Valley Flood Caller because untapping Glarb so you can
surveil extra is
huge.
really good.
Kind of funny how all of these decks kind of, it seems, work well with Valley Flood Caller in some way or another.
My worry, though, is I don't think that Glarb is going to have the longevity in the format the way that Stella Lee and Plague-On will. Like, Stella Lee has been around for at least 6 months now and hasn't died. And sometimes for new commanders to be around for this long already and still seeing pretty decent tournament results, like, that's impressive right away. A lot of decks die by now.
Yeah, I think what Stella and Plague-On have is like a uniqueness to them that they feel like a kind of a specific role. But from what I've seen from Glarb, what Glarb does well is mid-range pile, and what does mid-range pile better is partners. Does that make kind of sense? Like what Glarb does is just like kind of, in my opinion, like good stuff pile, just like Sultai good stuff.
Yeah.
And the better Sultai good stuff deck right now seems like Tymna Thrasios.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the what's the word I'm looking for?
Meta?
The specialness of Nadu, Plague-On, and Stella Lee. Yeah, they're way more unique. There's no other decks that will play like them.
Yeah.
So like if you're looking for that experience, you really can't look anywhere else.
Right.
So how do we rank these then?
For me, Nadu's the strongest commander.
That's for sure.
We agree there.
And then Plague-On's next.
I think Plague-On's next, although it's newest. I've seen the most good out of Plague-On, I think.
It's the one I'm the most excited for next, and I think has the most potential above the other two.
Then the Cowgirl.
Then Stella Lee.
Stella Lee is next, and then Glarb is after that. And then for the other two honorable mentions,
we're not ranking them because they're honorable mentions. But if you list them that way, with going Glarb at number 4, Stella Lee at number 3, Plague-On at number 2, Nadu at number 1, that is exactly how I would list that out too. So I think I'm into that. That sounds great. Well, this has been one hell of a year for some cEDH, taking some wild twists and turns that no one expected. But luckily, there's another year for cEDH that's to come. And that year is 2025.
Are we going to talk about that next time?
Well, next time's the holiday episode. So I figure for the first week of
the
first week of January, once it is
2025,
then we can start talking about it. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I want to enjoy the holiday season as it's coming up. I want to slow down a little bit.
Wind down. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so on Patreon, like our $100 patrons.
Jude Knowles, Spangler, Demetrius Clark, Larceny Roars, Your Boy Blue, Sparky B, Insomnia, SC Phillip, Old and Grumpy, Gecko21, Caleb Ritchie, Zach Hartley, Reactive, Sean in the Ice, Stormageddon, Luke Cook, Demon of Rosgrees, Peter Stewart, Cornell Wild, Uncle Butts, Nick Foles Go to 9, Quaja A. Hamid, Lauren Connell, and Baby G-Bus.
You can follow us on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky for more content.
Thank you, Dragon Shield, for supporting the show. Use our link and code PLAYTOWIN5 for 5% off.
You can also get our merch at playtowinmtg.com.
Thank you for watching.
See you next time.
Roy Turner, Mystic Muffin Man, Jacob Bauer, Tyler Watson, Zachary Coulson, Jabaha, Mace the Ace, Dalton Poteet, Hobo Ghost, Justin, Man Solo, Jacob Depp, Jan Wildfang, Thomas Bueno, and David Nelson.
Is that it?
That's all. I should have gotten noisemakers for this.
Like an air horn?
I should be blowing up.